What's up, guys? It's been a while. It is January 16th and we are starting our off-season stuff. I've got some videos I want to work on and am working on for you guys, but as some of you may or may not know, I shoot some target archery stuff, and the last 6 years I spent on Matthews factory staff, so I shot nothing but Matthews bows for the last 6 years. Well, I kind of had gotten a little burnt out on it last year, and it wasn't fun to me like it used to be, having to fulfill that contract by going to so many shoots every year. I got to the point where I felt like I was going to shoots because I had to and not necessarily because I wanted to. So I let my contract go. I felt like there could be somebody else that would be better suited for it now. It's just a different time in my life, but I still wanted to have a bow that I could shoot and piddle with, and maybe, you know, shoot a tournament here or there. So I had my shop that I like to use over here in North Carolina order me a PSE Supra Focus. I shot PSE for a long time before Matthews, and I kind of just wanted to catch up with what they've been doing the last few years. So I ordered it a little over about a month ago, and it came in today, and I thought it'd be a while before I could get over here, but it just so happened I got off work at a pretty good time today, so I'm running over here and getting it, and I'm going to show you guys how I go about setting up my target bows. For any of you that might be a little interested in target archery, or you already do shoot target archery and just kind of interested on maybe some tuning or picking up some tips and tricks here or there. So stay tuned, check it out. And if any of you guys in Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, Western North Carolina need a bow or looking for a really good archery shop, Cooper's Trading in Burnsville, North Carolina is the best one I've ever been to. Great guys, really knowledgeable. They carry so much stuff, it's unbelievable. So if you're within a few hours, it's probably worth you checking it out. When you first pull in, it's not going to seem like much, but when you go inside, it's packed wall to wall with stuff. They carry pretty much all the major bow manufacturers, but it's a great place, Cooper's Trading. Check it out. Okay guys, we finally made it home, and I'm not sure how much of this we're going to get through tonight, but I wanted to at least show you the bow and get it kind of set up, go ahead and put my accessories on it and such. But went ahead and ordered a PSE Supra Focus. This is the first PSE I've owned since 2013. This is the platinum titanium color. Let's see. And it kind of changes on the lighting as far as the color. It's kind of like a charcoal when you look at it in certain lights, and like right now it looks more of like a silver with a bluish kind of hue to it. But it's 37 inches axle to axle. This is the regular Focus. This isn't the XL. It's got the Evolve cam, the SE cam. And I've just basically at this point I've just got it out of the box and felt it. First impressions is this cam feels really good. It's kind of the feel I like, especially for a target bow. It's set on 75% let off right now. It feels a little less than that. I'd say it's closer to 70, but we will measure it. First thing that stands out to me is the grip. The grip is phenomenal. It's got this little channel that runs right down the front of it, and that works out really good for I like to put my pointer, my middle finger on the front of the grip just like that. It's very, very comfortable, very natural. If you'll notice, this bow is shaped totally different than anything else that's on the market right now, and it's a true deflex riser. And what that means is your pivot point of your grip is behind the pivot point on the limb, or in front of the pivot point on the limb. So here's your limb pivot point, here's your pivot point on your grip. You can tell that this is further forwards generally that leads to a little more forgiveness. So we will see. But we're going to go through. I've changed the draw length. It's got a rotating module that's super easy to tell where you're at. I kind of like that, coming from bows with draw length specific cams and then having to get module swaps. This is kind of a welcome change, being able to just, you know, take 2 screws out and rotate it to where you need it. But let's get the draw length changed. We'll get a D-loop on there. I'll show you exactly how I do that. And we're going to get our accessories at least bolted on. We're not really going to adjust much. I want to walk you guys through that and tell you just kind of how I do it. But we'll get to it. Okay guys, we got our basic accessories mounted on here. I got an AAE Pro blade that I mounted on. It's got a 10,000 standard blade on it. Got my Excel Carbon Achieve mounted up here, the bowfinger back bar mount, and I put a 10-degree down quick disconnect on the front for the front stabilizer. Now I want to get my knocking point and loop tied in. I haven't checked my center serving. Center serving is actually really good. As some of you may know, some may not, I build my own bowstrings. But in an instance like this, I'm going to leave these on at least until I can get my draw length dialed in and everything. And then once I get the bow, you know, pretty close, I will press it, take these strings and cables off, measure everything, and then build a set perfectly to the measurements that come off of it. That way I know I have the reliability of the strings I build without having to twist and untwist and do everything. I can just put them directly on and it's ready to rock and roll. One of the things that's really similar between the Matthews bows that I'm used to and these PSE bows, and a lot of other bows on the market too, is these bows are what's considered a center pull bow. Meaning the center of the riser and the center of the bow is at the rest bolt or the burger hole, which makes it pretty easy when it comes to setup and tuning. What I generally do is measure dead in between the axles or the cams, and that's where I want my arrow knocked. So a lot of times I'll measure that and then I'll mark it with a Sharpie and then knock my arrow directly on there, and then I will tie my knock sets above and below from that point and then tie my loop on. And I'll kind of give you an idea how I do that right now. Okay, so there's several different ways that you can do this as far as marking the center of the string, and I'll be honest, none of them is very easy. The easiest way is for me personally when I'm building my strings, and once I get them finished, I will just mark the dead center of the string right off the jig, and that is by far the easiest. Some people will try and measure, you know, from your axles, go axle to axle, divide by 2, and then try and eyeball it right there. It's pretty tough. It's probably easier to get it in the ballpark that way, but for me personally, I can't seem to get it as exact as I want to. So generally what I will do, sometimes you'll have to twist your string stop out of the way a little bit, but I'll kind of eyeball it here of what I'll run my tape measure up to right up against the cam and where the string comes off of the cam, and I'll kind of eyeball the center of the serving. So looks like right around 16 5/8 is close, and then we'll flip it and see where we're at. So we're close right there, but I would say we're about a 1/16 off. I'm gonna move this cable guard rod so it's not in my way. I mean, I'm gonna move the string stop so it's not in my way. Okay, so just take our tape measure and butt it up against the cam just like so. And 16 5/8 is going to be really close. Yeah, we're about a 16th off. So let's say we'll say 16 and 11/16. See how that looks on both ends. Yeah, 16 and 11/16 is really, really close. So that's where we're going to start. Okay, so we've got the center of our string marked. We have clipped on the particular arrow size that we're probably going to use. In this case, I'm going to just go ahead and set this up as a 3D bow first and foremost. And we're going to start with a Super Drive, Easton Super Drive 23. So we've got this clipped on the string right where we want it. And then I'm going to use this blue halo serving just because that's what I've got sitting here. And I'm going to pull off about a, I don't know, we'll pull off about a 18-inch section. Maybe 1 foot, just enough that you can get a good handle on it. Okay, I want you guys to bear with me on this filming stuff. I'm doing this all by myself. It'd be a lot easier to have somebody over my shoulder filming, but we've got our 18-inch section of serving here, and I prefer to tie my knock sets. And this isn't just for a target bow. This could go for a hunting bow. But I prefer to tie knock sets top and bottom. And the particular knot that we're going to use is just like you're tying your shoes, you know. Except for there's a twist. So shoes you just go through one time. I'm going to go through a second time. You don't have to do it that way. It's just for me personally, these knots bite a little bit better and a little less likely to come unraveled. So we're going to do our top knock set first. So we're going to just alternate between doing the front of the string and the back of the string. And we're going to seat it down right on the knock. And I want, because I'm shooting a blade rest, I like to have my top knock slightly smaller than my bottom. And that just helps apply some downward pressure onto the blade. It kind of helps keep the arrow from wanting to jump as you draw back. So we're just going to tie a few of these alternating between front of the string and back of the string. So that's our second knot on the front, second knot on the back. And then generally I will stop on my third knot. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you see what I mean. This is my third knot I've tied on the front of the string, and that's where I stop. So I'll just do that. And then for a long time, this used to be a no-no for archeries using glue. I just like to put just a little small dab right on the last knot there, just to help keep it from wanting to come unraveled. If you do this, you want to make sure to not get it on your serving at all. Super glue is some pretty nasty stuff. And then I'll just leave that. I'll cut it like so. And then I'll give that glue a few minutes to dry, and then I'll burn it. So then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull off about 18 inches of serving here. And then we're going to do the exact same thing on the bottom with one little caveat or two. The first thing is we're going to leave a little bit of a gap. This is where a lot of people go wrong with blade rests, is you do not want your knots seated up and pinching on your arrow nock. So I leave just a little bit of a gap there, and kind of over time your serving will separate just a little bit underneath your D-loop knots, and it'll pinch that together a little bit. So hopefully, let me move this just for a second, see if you can see about how much gap I've got there. Let's see. Alright, may not look like much, but that arrow has room to slide up and down. Now this serving is a lot tighter than I like, but like I said, I'm just leaving this on here just long enough to get my draw length and everything right. Okay, so we want to leave our little gap there. Like I said, the reason for that is so we don't get any knock pinch. Knock pinch is a really bad thing. It can cause tuning issues, accuracy issues, all kinds of crazy stuff. I've seen a lot of crazy results just coming from knock pinch or knock fitment being way too tight. And these knocks are fitting this serving a little tighter than I'd like, but we're just doing this just so I can get my draw length and everything pretty close. They're not so tight that it's going to cause a major issue, but it's tighter than I prefer. So we're going to tie this. If we stopped on our third knot on the top, I'm going to say we're going to stop on about our fifth knot on the bottom. So this is our third right now. And if you're new to this, you're probably thinking, what in the world is knock pinch? And think of it like this: like if your knock, if there's no distance between the top and bottom of your knock, whether you're shooting dead in between your D-loop or you have tied knock points, as you draw back, this string pinches together. Because you think about when you're at full draw, the string's at a sharp angle like this. And what happens is those knots from your loop, or these knots, will pinch on the top part and bottom part of this knock. And if you're shooting a blade rest, a lot of times it'll lift that blade up, or lift that arrow up off the blade, and it just causes a lot of inconsistencies. So believe it or not, a looser knock fit and some gap in between your tied knock sets will really help. I mean, it's a big help. It kind of goes opposite of what most bow hunters think. Most bow hunters want a tight knock fit. They're afraid of their arrow coming off of the string or what have you. If you have to shade one side or the other between too tight and too loose, actually too loose is what I prefer. Not loose to the point that your arrow is barely clipping on the string, but the way I describe perfect knock fit would be your knock can slide up and down the serving freely, and then you can rotate your string just like that, and it doesn't move the arrow. Now you can see it's wanting to move this one just a little, and that's why I said this one's just a little bit too tight. I've done this enough now to where I can just clip the arrow on and know immediately if it's right or wrong or good enough. And this one is good enough, but it's tighter than I would like. So we're going to put another drop of glue on here and then melt our knots. Our next step is to tie a D-loop, and I shoot a hinge release on my target bows for the most part, occasionally a thumb button release, and this is the best loop material I have ever used. It wears very, very well, but the big but, more people would use this stuff, but the issue with it is it's 100% Spectra. This is BCY number 23, and it's very thin, 1.6 millimeters, but because it's all Spectra, it wears, like, it's almost impossible to wear this stuff out. But it does not want to melt and form that ball like everybody's used to with like BCY24, which is probably the most popular D-loop material out there. But there's a trick to making a D-loop with this, and I'm about to show you guys. If you use a hinge release, this is some awesome stuff, and hopefully this will help you as far as making your loop. So what I do, and the key to all of it, I've got a scrap piece here. Okay, so we got our pliers. This is the key. So if you'll see here, we've got a clean cut right on the end, just like that. So what you do is you just take your needle nose and leave just a little bit on this guy, about like that. And then you're just going to take your lighter and melt it, let it melt all the way down to those needle nose pliers. And then when you get there, you're just going to tap it on the end, and that melts that outer shell of the D-loop material to the inner core, so you don't have an issue. Now what makes this stuff so awesome, especially for a target archer, is you can leave this long. You know, make your loop a little bit longer than what you think, because you can continue to melt this. So like, say I felt like my D-loop was just a little bit too long and I wanted it just a little shorter, but usually if you cut that melted ball off, refray it and do all that, it ends up being way too short. So you can just, you know, pinch behind it however much you think, and watch, it'll melt right back down to that needle nose plier. Tap it and you can shorten it just like that. It's awesome stuff. So generally what I do on my D-loop is I'll melt that one end, and then I'll measure it over here on the press, and I would say I cut mine about 4 1/8, and then melt the cut I just made, and that's what I'm going to do. And that leaves me a little bit longer loop, between 4 1/8 and 4 1/4, and then you can always shorten it up from there. Okay, so now we got our loop ready, and we're just going to tie this guy on here. Now generally, if this was a bow, if I was going to shoot it a lot like this, I actually like putting my peep in first. That way my loop doesn't cinch down on this center serving, and then I'm having to rotate and spin my loop, which causes premature serving separation. But in this instance, I'm not going to be shooting these strings for very long, so I'm just going to go ahead and tie it on there so I can put at least a shot or two through it before we go to bed. So we get that loop tied on there just like that, and then I just take a pair of needle nose. I actually have a pair of pliers for this, but they're in there in my string building stuff. So just give it a little tug just to make sure it's kind of tight, and that'll settle and stretch a little bit. Okay, so I need to move this guy back up and get it where it needs to be. I just spent a few minutes talking about my next step, and my memory card got filled up. I haven't been able to dump everything onto a hard drive just yet and clear off my memory cards from all of this hunting season. But so I just spent 10 minutes finding a peep too, because I don't know how to put things up at the end of the season. But at this point, I'm going to bolt my bars on here and get a feel for the bow on the draw length, at least get it close. And a lot of times I'd put the peep in, you know, ahead of time before I even shot the bow, because I have a general idea measurement wise where I'm going to be. But I'm setting this bow up from scratch. I don't know anything about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot it a few times, and I'm going to pay attention to this peep tag that's in the string, which is marking the center of the string to put your peep in. And I'm going to pay attention to where that's at and maybe move it up or down as needed to get it pretty close. Before I do all of that, I need to get my rest pretty close, and I'll show you exactly how I set that. I used to use levels and everything, but anymore I eyeball it and then let the bare shaft and the paper tell me what to do from there. So let's do that right now. All right, since we've already got our D-loop on in roughly the center of the string, now we need to set our rest where it needs to be. Generally, you just want to set it where it's running dead through that burger hole, and might be a little low right now, but it's actually pretty close. Now, if you'll notice, that blade is laid over a little more than what I'd like. I don't want it 40 degrees, but I don't want it like 25 degrees either. I think somewhere around that 30-degree mark would probably be pretty close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand this blade up a little bit and then move my rest back down. Kind of a tip, if you're not familiar with blade rests, is the less angle you have in it, so the more it lays down, the more that makes that blade act like a weaker blade. And you can see that's got some bounce to it. So when I stand that blade up a little bit, it will make that blade act and react like a stiffer blade. And there's some forgiveness in that blade, in my opinion. You want it to be as soft as possible. I want it to be as soft as possible with still providing the support you need, or that the arrow needs, to get a good consistent tune. And that's something you can play with a little bit personally to see what works the best for you. But at this point, I can kind of eyeball it and get it where I want it, and I know right there where it's at right now is laid over a little more than what I like. So let's fix that first and foremost. Okay, these AAE Pro blades are pretty nice for doing this kind of thing. It's just got a set screw down here on the bottom that you will loosen. We actually need to go down a size on our Allen wrench. So you just loosen that guy down here, and then you've got another bolt right here that you can turn and adjust your pitch of your blade. So let's see where we're at there. Alright, that's more like it as far as a pitch for me. You can see it's still got some give to it. We may actually go up just a tick more. And that sort of thing is the thing that I'm like, I will play with and adjust as the year goes on, to try and get ultimate forgiveness out of the bow. So you want to make sure you tighten that joker back up. And then, because we did that, we're going to have to move our rest down just a little. Once again, a Pro blade is awesome. All you do is loosen a screw on the other side, and then you just rotate the little thumb screw down here, and it gradually brings that arrow down. So generally what I do when I'm eyeballing this is I'm looking at the top line of the arrow and comparing it to like my sight bar, or maybe your cable guard rod, some kind of straight line. Like I said, you're going to tune this anyway. Shoot it through paper, shoot a bare shaft, whatever. So there's really no point in breaking out the levels. So I just want to set it up to what I eyeball as level to slightly knock high. And that's going to be a pretty close starting point right there. Okay. And as far as center shot, most all of your major bows these days, you can look down the riser, look down the cam tracks, whatever, but for me, I just take a tape measure and I measure from the inside of the shelf to the dead center of the arrow, and I want it to be 13/16. You know, somewhere between 3/4 and 13/16 is acceptable, and I am dead in the middle between 3/4 and 13/16. 13/16 is probably what most manufacturers recommend. I think most of the time dead center of the bow is 3/4. So I feel like if I set it up in between 3/4 and 13/16, that gives me wiggle room both ways, to really get it dialed in on your tune. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt my bars on because that'll kind of change things a lot and how the bow feels. I'm going to start basically where I left off last year on my TRX and kind of where I start with most bows. I'm going to put a 30-inch front bar on a 10-degree down, quick disconnect, 15-inch rear bar on my bow finger, ultimate bar mount, and I want to set, I've got about 8 ounces on the front of the 30-inch bar, and then I've got like 16 or 17 on the back of the 15. Most likely I might have to take some of that weight off. I'm not in shooting shape at all. I've shot my hunting bow very little through the hunting season, and it's quite a bit lighter than my target bow. So I'll probably have to take some off and work back up to it. But this bow's mass weight is about the same, if not just a little bit less than what the Matthews was. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm gonna put those on and we're gonna fire a shot. Okay, we got everything on here. I know my D-loop's going to be a little short. I have not checked timing. I have not measured draw length. I just want to put a shot or two on it just to kind of get things settled in as far as strings and cables and all that stuff. Give me an idea where my peep needs to be. So let's fire one here and see what we get. Alright, we fired a shot. That draw length is actually pretty close. The poundage feels like a lot more than 60 pounds. I don't know if it is or not, but we're going to take a couple more shots here and kind of get used to it, and then we're going to measure everything and see where we're at. On the shot, what I'm noticing is with this, forward limb angle, the bow kind of has that jump to it, which I actually like. It gives you a little bit of feedback on your shot. Let me see if I can get another bullet here. I don't know what the draw weight is, but it feels like more than 60 pounds. It feels like it's shooting really hard. The peep's gonna have to go up a little from where this tie-in is. And if anything, the draw length might be a little short, believe it or not. So we will see. All in all, feels pretty good for a target bow. Where I haven't shot much, I feel really tense, but that'll go away. It takes a little bit to kind of relearn how to relax and make good shots. I'm really happy that I got the 37-inch focus rather than the 40-inch focus. I really like this string angle. My shots are not feeling super smooth at the moment, but I've been shooting the thumb button all hunting season, so it's gonna take a little bit of time to remember how to execute properly with a hinge. I'm gonna shoot my two 3D arrows from the last 2 years. One of them's a Super Drive 23 325 spine. I can't remember how much I got in the front. I want to say I got around 130 grains in the front of both arrows. I've got a 325 spine and a 375 spine, and I've got some Super Drive 25s as well. But we'll fling both of them through this chronograph. I still have to put a peep in, which will slow it down, but I've also got some paper taped up across the chronograph, so maybe we can kill two birds with one stone. Okay, let's see what we get. This is the 325 spine. I don't know that the chronograph's really going to work, but I just get an idea what a fletch shaft does through paper. Chronograph part didn't work, but for a fletch shaft through paper, we'll say it's a pretty good start. Alright, let's actually see what we can get for a speed. Like I said, we don't have a peep sight, so it'll be a little bit slower. Wow. It's 298 with my bow, or with the arrow from my bow last year. Should be 290 anyway. I was shooting that arrow out of my TRX-7 last year and getting about the same speed, and this bow is rated slower. Knot fits a little too tight. We're getting good speed, 297, 298. We'll have to see what it does when we put a peep in it, but we got a long ways to go. I feel like my draw length is a little short. But it's in the ballpark. I think maybe as that loop stretches out a little bit, it may change that feel. But I'm gonna run some shots through it here, and probably call it a night. And I'll check back in with you guys tomorrow, and we will actually get into the nitty-gritty of draw length and tuning and the whole nine. But so far, first impressions are pretty good on the PSE Supra Focus.